For today, the topic that I have, I am Angela Thomas. I am from SFLC.in, which is a civil society that's based out in India, Delhi. We primarily look at, we are a legal organization that also looks at policy and advocacy on the tech space. So I'll begin with that. The topic that I have for today is the growing threat of personal liability in platform regulations. So the idea behind this topic came somewhere around last year when Mr. Pavel Durov, who's the founder of Telegram, was arrested in Paris for various reasons, including sexual trafficking content which was transferred in the platform, and the way that Telegram was not responding to demands of legal authorities. Also, during the same time, there was an issue where X, which is Twitter, was banned from Brazil, and the reason was whether the platform decided to remove itself from Brazil because there was a safety concern regarding employees in the country. So that really brought us to the topic on whether there is a threat of personal liability in the coming laws and platform regulations. Now, in order to understand that, we will have to quickly go through the evolution of the platform regulation laws that have come during these times. So earlier, back in the day, in the early internet era, what we mainly see is the three laws that shaped the main law that is coming from US, which shaped the nature of the internet, which is Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. So according to this law, publishers were not platforms were not considered as publishers, and they were not responsible for any of the content that was being provided on their platform. During this era, the focus was for the internet to grow without any innovation and restrictions on freedom of speech. So the approach on regulation was a light touched, and the idea was to protect intermediaries such as social media platforms and give a complete freedom to users. In the EU, we see the e-commerce directive, which stated that, gave platforms a limited liability, which is if they got to know about any particular content on their platform which was illegal, then it had to be taken down. This is the actual knowledge of illegal content. This is also known as the notice and takedown regime, which is commonly followed in most jurisdictions right now. In India, also, we had a similar provision which said that if the intermediaries get to know that there was content which is misleading on their platform, then they have to take it down, or they will have to face liabilities. If not, they were under the safe harbor protection. So in this era, the platforms grew rapidly, and freedom of speech was not restricted per se. Then came the rise of platform power and accountability in the 2010 to 2016 timeline. So this is primarily marked by a couple of events. One was the Arab Spring, which happened in 2011, where a group of protesters had used social media platforms to basically come together and unionize against the government. So after this entire revolution had taken place, there were concerns from multiple jurisdictions about how the internet and social media platforms were being used against the governments. And also there was the emergence of hate speech and terrorist content, which became a lot more popular in the platforms. This brought tech companies and governments to an understanding of that platforms are not anymore neutral, and they should be taking responsibilities even as intermediaries. So the EU Code of Conduct on Hate Speech came up, which required tech companies to voluntarily remove any hate speech content within 24 hours. One of the first laws that actually came in this place was Germany's DG in 2017. According to this law, any obviously illegal content had to be taken down within 24 hours, and if not, the companies had to file fines of around 50 million euros. So this era marked the shift of platforms from neutral onlookers to platforms as a responsible intermediary. Followed by this was the age of data protection, disinformation, and regulatory tightening. This is from 2016 to 2020. There were multiple cases which came around how platforms had misused the data that they collect in order to in order to make differences in public opinion, including changes in election results and interfering in personal lives of people more than that was required through advertisements. So in this era, there were key legal shifts which included the introduction of General Data Protection Regulation, which is the GDPR from the EU. Australia and France also had enacted stricter content moderation laws, especially post the Christchurch mosque attack. In this attack, also a terrorist attack was live streamed on the internet, and this content had gone extremely viral. But the regulators found it difficult to take down every single pop of this content. Questions around whether Section 230, which is the primary law of the internet from the US, was also questioned on whether it needs other reforms. So again, in this era, we see a clear shift from voluntary self-regulation to proper legal obligations coming to the picture. Finally, as we look at it today, the new laws, the current laws have emerged where platforms are not just onlookers, but they have to take proactive accountability measures in order to assess, prevent, and mitigate system risks that are existing on the platform, such as hate speech. So the main laws that we see today is from EU, which is Digital Services Act, then from the UK on Online Safety Act. These laws have put more obligations on the platform with respect to analyzing their algorithms, having more transparency requirements, and also putting liabilities on platforms. Now, to look at when the rise of personal liabilities started coming into the picture, another key factor that we have to understand here is how platform governance challenges always multiplied in the global south and the global majority. This was because of compliance and accountability gaps which these platforms showed, because platforms were based out in the US, and they evaded prosecutions in local jurisdictions. There were always delay or insufficient user remedies, which means that governments found it difficult to ask platforms to take down content. Platforms kept evading government responses and did not have sufficient teams to monitor the situations in local jurisdictions. And cultural and linguistic blind spots also added to this. Another key factor which led to the rise of personal liability is also the, like I said, jurisdictional evasion by platforms. So platforms often contended that they are not based out in the particular country. They are based out in the US, and they cannot be tied down by the laws of the local country. Initially, there was always multiple arguments on how platforms, how the laws did not apply to the platforms, and the courts had to courts at multiple times looked at why they couldn't open a local office or why they didn't have local employees in the country. So this again gave rise to regulators looking at different means to catch hold of these platforms. Now that brought into the main changes in platform regulation laws, which is most of the countries have enacted laws which require local representatives to be part of their jurisdiction, platforms to register within their jurisdiction. We recently saw this situation unfolding in Nepal as well. Then also there was the requirement of data localization, where governments required the data that platforms held to be kept within the country, so that it facilitated take down and access requests in a easier manner. All of this saw the rise of personal liability for local representatives also. Now, that is because what actually happened was during these times, what was usually seen, what was primarily seen as the doctrine of lifting of corporate veil, where only a couple of employees, that is the platform owners or the main executives of the platform, were held accountable under multiple other laws. These laws kept coming, found its way to platform regulation laws as well, where any local employee that was part of the organization, any local employee was being tried with charges on the evasions that platforms had taken, had got into place. So this is primarily seen in two countries as of now, which is in India, we have the information technology rule, which gives criminal liability to the chief compliance officer, nodal officer, and grievance officer, where the liabilities are up to 5 years of imprisonment or even 7 years of imprisonment if they fail to assist authorities. Recently, we saw this in United Kingdom as well with the Online Safety Act, where senior managers and executives can be criminally prosecuted and imprisoned up to 2 years if they fail to produce the requirements as per the Ofcom, which is the regulator there. Now, this brings us to major concerns. Let's look at the major concerns for why this personal liability as a regulatory rule is failing. So one primary reason is obviously free speech, where platforms may end up over-censoring content to avoid legal risk and stifling legitimate expression in public debate. This is specifically to save their employees. So again, platforms would decide to save their employees and leave countries because it is not viable for them to stay in that particular country, with employees having the risk of imprisonment and platforms having higher risk of fines. We saw this happening in Brazil, as well as this has also commonly happened in Russia and Turkey, where LinkedIn, Telegram, X all have threatened to leave their spaces. So this again brings us with the problem of how we as people are losing out on our free speech because of such extreme regulations. Another way in which this is misused is where governments itself use these laws to weaponize against the officers of these platforms. And these officers are forced to give in to government requests in order to avoid criminal liability. And again, employees are used as scapegoats by platforms also to escape severe liabilities that would come to them, such as fines. Yeah. So other than this, the reason why this is popular also is because what platforms look at, what governments look at is there needs to be someone who they can reach out for quicker content removal, especially when it comes to content which is on national security basis. So that is the reason why governments are governments particularly want this personal liability and local employees to be part of legislation, part of the legislations. Again, there are issues like hate speech, especially when it comes to other forms of content, like the removal of removal of content that is not that should not be visible to children, and other NCII matters. But the way in which this regulation comes into place actually puts platforms in risk than putting them at a safe spot. So that brings me to the conclusion that I have today, which is we already have established principles of doctrine of lifting of corporate veil, where corporate employees can be corporate employees, meaning the platform owners or the executive level employees, can be sued if there is a deliberate negligence from their part, and if they are actually involving in distracting the legal process, or destroying evidences, or giving false evidences. But that does not mean so it should be limited to such extreme cases, and that should not mean any local employee should be scapegoat into the responsibility and liability of having criminal sanctions against them for the failure of platforms. Additionally, there should also be stricter laws on how fines are collected from platforms, because platforms usually evade the responsibility of paying fine amounts. So the fine amounts has to be increased, and there should be better cross-border coordination regarding how these fines are collected. And of course, finally, there's definitely a need for stricter enforcement measures, which includes independent algorithmic audits and other mandatory transparency reports. An example of this is the DSA, where transparency requirements are on a much higher ground than what we see in other countries. Also, there has to be collaboration when it comes to deciding cases with government and civil society. So that will again help the platforms in taking a decision in a much faster manner. That brings me to the conclusion that limited liability on personal rise of personal liability for platform employees is not a solution that we are looking for, but rather we have to focus on improving the systems and platforms in itself. Thank you. If there are any questions. There's a comment which says that the real challenge is finding a balance, ensuring platforms are responsible without creating fear that limits free expression or innovation. Yes, that's absolutely right. Every time a government organization tries to pressurize the platforms always threaten the government back with exiting the particular country, and that is not an ideal solution for either of us. Yeah, so we have to figure out a responsible way in which it can be balanced.
So I saw a question from earlier. The question is, I'd like to ask whether you think information disclosure from benefit users, for example, by revealing the complaint processing time, success rate, and similar data.
Definitely, I think it gives us a sense of how accountable platforms are, and how much time that they are taking to actually process requests. There's always a contention from platforms which say that they are completely doing what they are required to do under the laws, and they are taking down content within 24 hours, and yet they are being threatened. So such data can actually reveal the practices that platforms are taking, and it can give us a better idea on whether what the platforms are claiming to do are being done. Thank you everyone who joined in. Thank you for listening. I hope you all have a great day. Thank you.